All right, today we're going to take a little trip back in time to explore some of history's absolute weirdest career paths. I'm talking about jobs that were so strange, so dangerous, and just so unbelievable that it's a really good thing they've gone the way of the dodo.
So, let me ask you something. Ever complained about your job? You know, the bad coffee, the meetings that could have been an email, that one client. We've all been there. But trust me, after we go through some of these historical gigs, your worst day at the office is going to feel like a five-star vacation.
All right, first up on our list, the world's fastest messengers. Think about this. Long before you could just fire off an email or a text, the fate of entire empires rested on the shoulders and, the legs of these high-speed messengers. This was an absolutely vital job, but man, was it a deadly one.
Yeah, before 1837, the absolute fastest way to get a message anywhere was to have a real, live person run with it or ride a horse. And we're not talking about sending a birthday card here. These were the actual commands that moved armies, that ran entire kingdoms. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
And what's so cool is how two giant empires tackled the exact same problem from totally different angles. You had the Persians, who built this amazing horseback relay system called the Angarium for written messages. And then you have the Incas, whose elite runners, the Choskis, didn't write anything down. Nope, they memorized every single word and sprinted through the treacherous Andes Mountains. Wild, right?
And that Persian royal road? It was way more than just a road. It was like a 1,700-mile-long engine powering the whole empire. All along this route, they had these relay stations with fresh horses waiting, so the messengers could just swap mounts and keep riding at a full gallop, 24/7. Just think about how efficient that is. A journey that would take a normal person 3 months on foot, they could now do it in just 1 week. That's not just fast, that's a total game changer when you're trying to run a massive empire. Okay, so we've gone from a job that could save an empire to a job that was supposed to save a soul. So if running for your life wasn't really your thing, maybe a career in, let's call it spiritual sanitation, would have been more your speed. Let me introduce you to the sin eater. Yep, you heard me right, a sin eater. Back in the day, in parts of Britain, when someone passed away, the family would hire someone, and their whole job was to eat a meal that would symbolically absorb all the dead person's sins. The idea was to give them a clean slate for the afterlife. It's a lot to take in.
So here's how it worked. The ritual was actually pretty straightforward. A simple meal, usually just some stale bread and warm beer, was placed right on the chest of the body. The belief was that the food would literally soak up all the person's sins. Then, they'd bring in the sin eater to eat the meal and take on that whole spiritual burden themselves.
And after you'd choke down your sin-filled snack, you'd say a quick prayer, something apparently as simple as, "Grub dub dub, thanks for the grub, yay God." Collect your tiny fee, and then you'd be pushed out the door as fast as humanly possible. But here's the really awful part, the terrible irony of it all. Your job was considered essential, right? You were helping souls get to heaven, but you were treated like an absolute outcast. People genuinely believed you were walking around permanently polluted by all the sins you'd eaten. So you were hated, ridiculed, and forced to live completely alone. Okay, let's switch gears completely. We're going from the quiet gloom of a deathbed to the roaring chaos of the high seas. Because during the age of sail, there was a job that demanded you be small, fast, and have a kind of courage that's, well, it's pretty much unimaginable today. Meet the powder monkey. See, in the middle of a frantic naval battle, you needed every single trained sailor at their post, on the guns or the rigging. So who got the job of running explosive gunpowder from the deep, dark magazine all the way up to the cannons? Yeah, they gave it to kids, often orphans. The thinking was that their small size and speed made them harder to hit, which is a pretty grim way to look at it. But just try to imagine this for a second. You're a kid, you're running barefoot on a deck that's slippery with seawater and probably blood, giant wooden splinters are flying through the air like daggers, and your job is to sprint back and forth with bags of gunpowder while cannonballs rip through the ship around you. Just terrifying. And if that mental image wasn't horrifying enough for you, get this. The typical age was around 12 to 14 years old. But there are records of powder monkeys being as young as 7. 7 years old. All right, let's leave the battlefield and step into the doctor's office. Well, the old-timey version of one anyway. Our next job required a really strong stomach, a good eye for color, and, how to put this, a very, very adventurous palate.
We're talking about the ancient art of uroscopy. For literally thousands of years, doctors were convinced that a person's urine held all the secrets to their health. So they built this whole system of diagnosis around it, and their methods were, let's just say they were very hands-on.
They even had these color charts to help with the diagnosis. Now, what's really fascinating here is that even though their whole medical theory was based on some pretty flawed ideas about the body's humors, they weren't always wrong. I mean, they figured out that greenish urine could mean jaundice. They didn't know why, but they made the connection.
And this really shows you the leap we've made, right? Back then, it was all about one doctor's personal opinion, what they saw, what they smelled, what they tasted. It was totally subjective. But today, of course, we have modern urinalysis. It's all about chemical tests and microscopes giving us objective, hard data. A little different.
Okay, for our last job, we've saved the weirdest for last. Seriously, this one is for anyone who ever wanted to just get away from it all by becoming a living, breathing piece of garden decor. I'm not kidding.
Let me introduce you to the Ornamental Garden Hermit. Yes, that was a real job title. In the 18th century, it was a whole trend for super-rich landowners to hire a guy to live in a little grotto or shack in their garden. He was basically a philosophical art installation that guests could come and look at. Just wow.
And the job requirements were absolutely insane. One ad offered a salary that would be like $100,000 today, which sounds great, but the catch was you had to live there for 7 years, and in that time you were not allowed to wash, cut your hair or nails, or speak to anyone. 7 years. And if you left before the contract was up, you got absolutely nothing.
So when you look at all these jobs, from sin eaters to hermits, what's the common thread? Well, each one, no matter how bizarre it seems to us, existed to fill a very specific gap in their society. A gap in technology or medicine or even just a need for status. And as society and technology moved on, these jobs just disappeared.
It's a really powerful reminder of just how fast things can change, you know? And it makes you wonder, what normal job that we do today is going to seem absolutely ridiculous to people 200 years from now?